Today's lesson is Ancient Stones of Mystery. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Helen.
And today we're going to continue talking about Stonehenge, that monument of stones in southwest England that millions of tourists go to every year because it's such an inspirational place and it's so mysterious.
Yes, I have never been to that part of England and I've never seen Stonehenge, of course, live. But it's definitely something that I would like to go see because it just, apart from all the mystery surrounding it, it seems like a really beautiful area of England if you like the countryside and if you like peace and calm and quiet. So it's definitely on my travel list.
Yes, indeed. England is an ancient country with lots of interesting things to see. And Stonehenge, of course, is one of the most famous ones. And we've been talking about that in our program since last time. And we did talk about the fact that they're mysterious. People really don't know why they were built. And we also talked about the fact that they weren't built in one go. It was a work in progress over 1,500 years.
Yes, and it has other mysteries surrounding it, such as the fact that the avenue leading up to it lines up perfectly with the rising sun during the summer solstice. So that is another feature of Stonehenge that has kept people scratching their heads.
And hopefully some of these travel restrictions will be lifted and people will be able to travel freely to places like Stonehenge. I'm sure people in England would love the extra income from tourism. Okay, let's get to it, everybody. Let's continue to talk about Stonehenge in the first part of today's lesson, which talks about various tours you can take of Stonehenge. Let's listen.
For those who flock to Stonehenge, musing on unanswered questions is part of the charm. To make the most of your experience, sign up for one of the Stone Circle Experience Tours, which happen outside of general admission hours and are limited to 30 people. Not only will you get to witness the spectacular sight of the sun rising or setting over the grassy plain, but you can actually wander among the weathered sarsens and blue stones.
第一部分我们看到单字 muse， 这个字是沉思或是思忖，常见的用法为 muse on、muse about、muse over 或是 muse upon something， 表示思忖什么事情。例如 She began to muse on the possibility of buying a house. 她开始思忖买一栋房子的可能性。或是 I like to muse about what I will do after graduating from university. 我喜欢思考我从大学毕业后要做什么。另外 muse 也可以当作名词，指创作绘画、诗歌或音乐等的灵感或是缪斯，像是 When writing his stories, Kevin looks to nature to be his muse. 当 Kevin 在写他的故事时，他将大自然当作他的灵感。或是 The musician lost his muse when his wife passed away. 那位音乐家在妻子死后就丧失了他的缪斯。
So the people who go visit Stonehenge, they might be interested in thinking about all of the unanswered questions, all of the mysteries, but that's only part of the charm. So it says here, for those who flock to Stonehenge, musing on unanswered questions is part of the charm. Musing here refers to the act of thinking about something, but instead of just thinking, you're thinking about it slowly, kind of in a dreamy way. You're not in a rush. You're just kind of wondering about the question of why something is the way it is. So you're musing on unanswered questions about Stonehenge, perhaps when you go visit there, but that's only part of the charm of Stonehenge. Stonehenge actually offers visitors other things to do and other things to think about.
Indeed, and musing, of course, is from the verb to muse, to kind of think about something. It could also be a noun, the muse, okay? So a lot of famous painters, of course, had a muse, like their wife or their girlfriend or something. They served as a muse, so they did a lot of paintings of that person. And here again, it's being used as a verb. So yes, you can muse on those unanswered questions. Yeah, why did they build this? And why did it take so long? Well, that's part part of the charm, but to make the most of your experience, sign up for one of the Stone Circle Experience Tours, which happen outside of general admission hours and are limited to 30 people. So it's a special kind of tour that you can feel entitled to if you're lucky enough to sign up for one of those tours. You want to make the most of your experience, which means you want to get as much out of an experience as you can. For example, if you travel to a famous place, you want to check out all the sites. You want to see pretty much everything. So that means you're making the most of your experience. You're taking advantage of everything it has to offer.
Right. So this Stone Circle Experience Tour, it happens outside of general admission hours and are limited to 30 people. So this particular tour happens outside of general admissions hours, which means that it doesn't take place during the time when most people are allowed to go visit Stonehenge. So for example, if you're allowed to visit Stonehenge between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m., I'm making up the time, but let's say if you're only allowed admissions into Stonehenge between 8 and 6, then the tour happens outside of this period. So it might occur before 8 a.m. or after 6 p.m. So it's outside of this time. And admission here refers to the process of accepting people into a place. So you have general admission, for instance, for a museum, or you have admissions into a concert hall. It's basically a way of controlling how many people are allowed to go into an official place.
Right. So, of course, you have to sign up for these special tours, and I think you need to be lucky, or it's probably a first-come, first-served basis. So you need to get there early enough to sign up for those special tours because they're only limited to 30 people. 30 people have the special honor, the special privilege of participating in these special tours, which will give you some information not available during general admission hours. And not only will you get to witness the spectacular sight of the sun rising or setting over the grassy plain, but you can actually wander among the weathered sarsens and bluestones. So perhaps with general admission, you have to go there during the day, not at sunrise or sunset, and then you're not allowed to actually walk next to those stones. But if you're part of this special tour, you have this special privilege here. You can wander among the weathered sarsens. Weathered means they've been there so long that they've kind of eroded because of wind erosion over thousands of years. I think you could describe the stones out at Yelio here in Taiwan as being weathered. They've been sitting there next to the ocean for thousands of years. So, of course, they've been eroded by the wind. They are weathered.
Yes, in day one, we had the phrase ravaged by the passage of time, and that could be another way of saying weathered. You can also say weathered by the passage of time. So it just means basically ruined or worn by things that are related to time and to nature, such as storms and wind and waves. And here, when you're on the tour, you get to witness the spectacular sight of the sun rising or setting. To witness something means to see something happen or to be present when something important happens. So you can be present when the sun rises and sets. And this sight of the sun rising and setting is spectacular, meaning it's very impressive, it's wonderful, it's beautiful. And if you're one of those 30 people who can witness something like this, then it's a very special, spectacular event.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the second part.
Soaking up the ethereal beauty of the circle isn't the only thing to do during your visit. Reserve at least an hour for the visitor center, where you'll find more than 250 objects from the site. The tools, pottery, and jewelry on display will give you deeper insight into the lives of the Stonehenge builders.
第二部分我们看到片语 soak up something， 指尽情享受或是充分体验。例如I sat down against a tree and soaked up the sounds and smells of the forest. 我靠着树坐着，享受森林里的天籁之音与芬多精。或是 Alicia plans to spend her whole vacation on the beach soaking up the sun. Alicia 计划整个假期都要在沙滩上尽情享受阳光。再来我们看到形容词 ethereal， 意思是超脱世俗的或是飘逸优雅的。例如 The singer had an ethereal style. 这位歌手拥有超脱世俗的气质。或是 Mandy loved the harp's ethereal tone. Mandy 喜欢竖琴仙乐般的声音。
So, continuing our visit with Stonehenge, it says here, soaking up the ethereal beauty of the circle isn't the only thing to do during your visit. So, first of all, we have the phrasal verb here to soak up, which means to, well, you usually use it to talk about a sponge, for instance. When a sponge soaks up water, it's drawing water into itself. But here we're using soak up in another sense. It means here to spend time experiencing something that is enjoyable. So you could, for instance, go to the beach on a weekend to soak up some sun, which means you're enjoying being under the sun, being in the sun. Here, when you're at Stonehenge, you can soak up the ethereal beauty of the circle. So it's a certain beauty that Stonehenge projects. It's an ethereal beauty, which means that it is very delicate. It's almost not a part of the real world. When I hear the word ethereal, I tend to think of angels. Like angels that are very light and they kind of flow in the air and they disappear very easily. So the writer here is talking about Stonehenge as having this type of beauty.
Yep, light and delicate, ethereal beauty. You can describe a woman as having ethereal beauty, or someone might have an ethereal voice if they're a wonderful singer or something like that. So again, we're talking about the almost cosmic beauty of this place. And it's not the only thing to do during your visit. There are other things to do than just look at those big rocks. Reserve at least an hour for the visitor center, where you'll find more than 250 objects from the site. So indeed, they don't just have the rocks there, they have a visitor center, which is probably kind of like a museum there. So yeah, you can look at those rocks, but you can also go to the visitor center because they've got some objects there behind glass cases, in glass cases or whatever, and you can check them out and learn a little bit about the history of Stonehenge, or maybe at least try to figure out yourself why it exists in the first place.
So the tools, pottery, and jewelry on display will give you deeper insight into the lives of the Stonehenge builders. So if you're wondering how Stonehenge got there and what the people were like who may have been responsible for building this incredible structure, you can get an idea maybe by looking at these objects, because they include everyday things like pottery, bowls and perhaps cups made from clay and jewelry, things that people wear. And it just kind of gives you a little clue into what those people may have been like or what their lives may have been like when you look at these things.
Indeed, so it can be quite fascinating. So if you're in England and you're into that sort of thing, then you should head to Stonehenge and you can check out all that stuff. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the third and final part.
After viewing the exhibition, step outside to get a taste of Neolithic village life. Next to the visitor center is a small cluster of replica houses, which are closely based on the findings of digs in the area. Inside, staff members act out daily activities of prehistoric residents. As you observe the ancient way of life, prepare to be amazed by just how far human civilization has come.
第三部分我们看到单字 cluster， 这个字是名词，意思是同类的人或是事物聚集的群、组或是簇。这个字有以下几种常见的用法。第一 ，clusters of 加名词。举例来说 ，The weather was warm and sunny despite several clusters of clouds in the sky。即使有数个云团在天空上，天气还是很温暖且阳光普照。第二 ，a cluster of 加名词。例如 ，Sarah woke up with a cluster of insect bites on her ankle。Sarah 醒来时，脚踝上有一片昆虫咬痕。此外 ，cluster 也可以当动词，指聚集或是丛生。例如 ，Most of the best restaurants are clustered around the town square。 最好的餐厅大多数都聚集在城市广场附近，或是 Flowers cluster around the window， 花朵围绕着窗户丛生。接着我们看到名词 replica， 表示复制品或是仿制品。例如 This week, the Natural History Museum is displaying full-size replicas of several prehistoric animals. 自然历史博物馆本周正在展览一些史前动物的原尺寸复制品。最后我们来看 prehistoric 这个形容词，指史前的。例如 Prehistoric people used stone tools and weapons. 史前人类使用石制工具与武器。或是The island's prehistoric inhabitants supported themselves by trading with the mainland. 这座岛的史前居民靠着与大陆交易为生。
So during your visit to Stonehenge, there are actually many things that you can do aside from just looking at the Stonehenge structure. You can take a tour, and then you can go to the visitor center where they have an exhibition of objects from long ago. And then after viewing the exhibition at the visitor centers, you can step outside to get a taste of Neolithic village life. Now, Neolithic here refers to a time in history human beings began to make tools using stone and to grow their own food. So that period of history is known as the Neolithic Period. And if you step outside, you can get a taste of what village life was like during the Neolithic Period.
Right, so of course we got the Stone Age, and then the Neolithic is the later part of the Stone Age. And again, stone weapons and tools and stuff were very common during that time. So yeah, if you want to imagine what life was like during that time of history, you could check out this visitor center. Imagine trying to get through a day without checking your line messages and stuff like that. They must have suffered so terribly during that time. And next to the visitor center is a small cluster of replica houses, which are closely based on the findings of digs in the area. So they may know what the houses look like, but those houses are long gone, so they have these replica houses. They're just houses that are copies of the original, and there is a cluster of them, just a set of them all together. A cluster just refers to a bunch of things together in one place.
Right. So inside these small replica houses, staff members act out daily activities of prehistoric residents. So if you go visit these small houses, which are replicas of what they believe to be the original houses, they are models, they are copies. That's what replica means. You will find staff members, people who work at Stonehenge, acting out daily activities of prehistoric residents. So prehistoric, it refers to the period of time before history was first written down. So we're not really sure about what happened, what stories happened before the time when world events began to be written down, because we have no record of these events. So that period of time before events were written down is known as prehistoric. And here we have members, people who work at Stonehenge, acting out daily activities. So I imagine they are dressed in costumes and they are doing things that they believe happened during prehistoric times. So that could include cooking or maybe doing household chores and so on.
And how they talk to each other and what games they played and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of fun there to watch them reenact history there. And as you observe the ancient way of life, prepare to be amazed by just how far human civilization has come. So when you see them demonstrate how life was during that time, or at least how they think it was during that time, you'll be amazed to wonder, gee, our lives are so much better now, or maybe they're even worse now. Who knows? It depends on your interpretation. But imagine they didn't have anything to write on. Again, they did not have smartphones back then. They did not have bicycles. They did not have cars. They could not travel to other places for exciting holidays. They couldn't go skiing and things like that. So yes, if you see these reenactments, you'll get a better idea about what life was like during that time and about human civilization. Civilization just refers to when people form societies and they have laws and rules and they develop language and stuff like that.
Right. So when we talk about human civilization here, yeah, we can also be talking about human society or the state of development of an advanced culture. And it really depends on how you look at it. You might think, well, life maybe was better back then, or maybe it's better now. But probably it's better now because we don't die as easily from disease and from war and all of that. So things have improved a lot.
Well, of course, it's better now than then because we're alive now and all those people who lived then are dead. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. It's time now to listen to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分建议我们可以报名参加一趟实证体验之旅。那这边它是用到片语 sign up， 我们来学它的不同用法哦。第一个呢就是课文的用法，用 sign up 来表达登记报名。我们要表达登记报名参加某个组织或是活动的时候呢，常常会用 sign up for something 来表达。例如She signed up for yoga classes， 就是说她报名了瑜伽课程。第二个我们可以用 sign somebody up 来表达跟某人签约雇用某人，这就相当于 sign somebody on。 好，例如 The record label signed the band up last year， 唱片公司去年签下了那个乐团。第三个我们可以用 sign somebody up 来表达替某人报名或者是让某人加入。假设同事或是同学们问你说要不要跟他们一起交换礼物，你就可以回答 That sounds fun, sign me up， 听起来很好玩耶，让我加入吧。好，那接着读到课文第三部分的第二句，他说Next to the visitor center is a small cluster of replica houses, which are closely based on the findings of digs in the area. 好，游客中心旁边是一小处仿造的房屋，它们完全是依照该区挖掘的结果制造的。我们看到句子里面的 next to the visitor center 是地方副词片语，is 是动词， a small cluster of replica houses 则是主词。那它后面再用一个非限定用法的关系子句来补充说明主词。简单来说，这个句子的结构是地方副词片语加动词加主词，而主词的后面带有修饰语。好，那这就是把地方副词片语移到句首的倒装句，我们就来学这个用法哦。当你要强调表示地方的副词啊，或者是副词片语的时候，或者是当你的主词带有比较长的修饰语，我们就可以把这个地方副词或副词片语移到句首作为强调，而后面的主词跟动词必须倒装。以句型来看呢，直述句的句型就是主词加动词加地方副词或副词片语，倒装之后就会变成地方副词或副词片语加动词加主词。特别注意的是，这个句型里面的动词啊，我们常常是用 be 动词或者是 come, go, sit,lie, stand, live 等等，其中的 sit 跟 lie 跟 stand 不是说坐着躺着站着哦，而是有这种位于坐落于的意思。好，我们来造个例句。A stack of file folders lay on the table. 桌上放了一叠档案资料夹。好，那我们这边主词就是 a stack of file folders， 动词是 lay。On the table 则是地方副词片语，这时候我们把 on the table 移到句首，再把动词跟主词交换位置，形成倒装句，就变成 On the table lay a stack of file folders。 好，那么以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天的单字吧。
Admission. Perry tried to get into the club, but was refused admission. Witness. The police officers talked to several people who had witnessed the accident. Spectacular. The view from the top of this mountain is spectacular. Cluster. A cluster of fans had gathered around the singer to ask for her autograph. Civilization. Art and philosophy are both products of civilization.
Discussion Starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today. In your opinion, what is the most interesting aspect of Stonehenge and why?
Well, I think it's very interesting that Stonehenge wasn't built in one go, that it actually developed over 1,500 years, because I had always thought that it was something that people worked on and then they finished it and they moved on.
Well, I found the rocks very interesting, as lots of these monuments all over the world have mysteries in those rocks, like how did they get all those rocks and make the pyramids in Egypt? There's some kind of structures in South America where the rocks fit perfectly together with no spaces between them. How the heck did they do that? So yes, indeed, I am interested in the rocks. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.